Good morning and a very warm welcome to you. I'm Rachel. You're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney, and this is the Global Markets Roundup. Let us look at the US benchmark updates first. Benchmark US markets closed higher on Tuesday as the stock segment saw broad gains led by tech, real estate and retail sectors. The S&P 500 was up 0.51% to 4,246.44. The Dow Jones rose 0.20% to 33,945.58. The Nasdaq Composite gained 0.79% to 14,253.27. And the small cap Russell 2000 was up 0.43% to 2,295.95. Investors were buoyed by the solid performance of tech, retail and real estate stocks. They're also keenly waiting to hear from the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who is scheduled to speak before a House committee about the current situation on jobs and inflation after the bank's meeting last week. 9 of 11 critical segments of the S&P 500 saw broad gains on Tuesday. Consumer discretionary, real estate and the tech sectors were the key movers, while utility stocks trailed. The index's real estate segment is among the top stock performers this quarter. Microsoft stock surged $265.79 in intraday trade on Tuesday, briefly placing its market cap at a little over $2 trillion. But it failed to cement the position after closing lower. It ended the session at 1.05% higher than the previous close. Apple Inc. closed with a $2 trillion market cap after the stock rose 1.27% from the previous close to $133.98. It had first crossed the $2 trillion mark in August last year. Nvidia Corp gained 2.18%. and ASML Holdings gained 0.86%. Adobe advanced 1.29%. Retail and real estate stocks also saw significant gains in Tuesday's session. Shares of online marketplace Etsy rose over 4% after they fell almost 20% in the past 3 months. Etsy remains one of the top performers with almost 85% stock gain in the last 12 months. Another e-commerce company, Shopify, saw a 2% increase in its stock price on Tuesday. Meanwhile, according to industry data, US home prices jumped 23.6% to $350,000 and $300 in May from a year earlier, as available homes for sale declined. However, sales soared over 44% compared to the figure last May, when the pandemic was at its peak, the National Association of Realtors say. Biotech firms Moderna Inc. surged 5.7%. and Novavax Inc. surged 6.98% at the close. Merck & Co. declined 0.73% and Thermo Fisher Scientific shed 1.59%. Electric vehicle maker Tesla gained 0.93%. Ford Motor Company rose 1.12% and electric equipment manufacturer Plug Power advanced 11.79%. Moving on to the top gainers and the top losers. Top performers on the S&P 500 included L Brands, Etsy, Cintas Corp, Twitter, and on the Nasdaq the top performers were Alfie, County Bancorp, Idera Pharmaceuticals, Silver Sun Technologies, and on the Dow Jones, Nike, Home Depot, Apple, Microsoft Corp were the leaders. The top laggards on the S&P 500 included Iron Mountain, Evergy, Kimco Realty Corp, Carnival Corp, and on the Nasdaq, Torchlight Energy Resources, Portage Biotech, Prometheus Biosciences, Cassava Sciences, and on the Dow Jones, Merck & Co, Boeing Co, Salesforce.com, Walgreens Boots Alliance were the laggards. Now let's look at the volume movers. The top volume movers were Alfie, Torchlight Energy Resources, Context Logic, Clover Health Investments Corp, Plug Power, Atossa Therapeutics, Sundial Growers, Apple, Ford Motor Company, Bank of America, AT&T, Freeport, McMoran Inc., General Electric Company. Moving on to the futures, commodities and bond market. Gold futures were down 0.23% to 1,778. $80 per ounce. Silver decreased 0.75% to $25.83 per ounce, while copper rose 1.09% to $4.22.95. Brent oil remained flat at $75.02 per barrel. WTI crude slightly declined by 0.04% to $73.09. The 30-year Treasury bond yields were down 0.73% to 2.091, while the 10-year bond yields decreased 1.24% to 1.467. US dollar futures index decreased by 0.17% to $91.73. Now, before I share the latest market updates with you from the UK and Australia, it's time for a very short break. Stay with
This is Andy Liu broadcasting from Kalkine Media Studio in Australia, and I'll be hosting the new Kalkine Wellness Show. The half-hour show will cover topics from how wellness as a concept has become even more significant during COVID, to how becoming vegan may improve your health, and much more. We are excited to showcase our live streaming show to our audience of millions overseas and in Australia. Tune in to Kalkine TV and join me.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Rachel. You're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney. This is the Global Markets Roundup. In the UK market news, the London markets traded in the green zone, reflecting positive investor sentiments after reassuring comments given by the New York Federal Reserve President John Williams. According to the Office for National Statistics, the UK public sector net borrowing had decreased to £24.33 billion in May 2021, while it was £43.76 billion in the previous year. Melrose Industries shares rose by around 2.12% after the company had decided to return a significant amount of cash to shareholders post completing the sale of Nortec air management business. The National Express Group had updated that the trading performance remained slightly ahead of expectations and announced the acquisition of Spanish urban bus operator Transporters Roba. Moreover, the shares grew by approximately 1.51%. Aston Martin shares dropped by around 1.48% after the company started the legal proceedings against Nebula Project AG. Packaging company DS Smith shares went down by around 0.79% after the company reported a sharp drop in annual profits due to higher cost and low price during the pandemic. Top three volume stocks in the FTSE 100 are Lloyds Banking Group, Rolls-Royce Holdings, Vodafone, and the top three sectors trading in the green: real estate, energy, basic materials. The top two sectors trading in the red are healthcare and financials. And the currency rates: the British pound to the US dollar is at 1.3941. The euro to the British pound is at 0.8563 at the time of this report. Well, now let's look at the updates closer to home. On Tuesday, the Australian benchmark index pared most of the losses incurred after a sizable drop on Monday. The ASX 200 closed the session 1.48% up at 7,342.3. On Wednesday, the ASX 200 is looking to open 0.1% lower, likely to be dragged by energy and mining stocks amid falling commodity prices. The Australian and New Zealand dollars ticked up on Tuesday. The Aussie dollar was up 0.21% to 75.5 cents, while the New Zealand dollar was up 0.54% to 70.23 cents. Bitcoin began making a comeback after falling below the $30,000 mark, not seen since January 2021. The cryptocurrency last traded at $32,628, up by 3.55%. But has nearly halved in value from the peak over the last 3 months. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies witnessed heavy selling pressure on Tuesday, hurt by a tightening crackdown on trading and mining in China. The Australian technology sector is poised to open with an uptick as tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 closed at an all-time high in the US. Shares such as Afterpay Zero, Zipco should be on investors' radars. On Tuesday, crude oil continued its momentum as commodity traders anticipate an end to pandemic lockdowns and will now unleash pent-up travel demand. The Australian energy shares such as Oil Search, Woodside Petroleum and Origin Energy could be looked upon for an intraday price action. Moving on to the yellow metal space now. On Tuesday, gold retreated from higher levels as traders awaited testimony from the Fed Chair Jerome Powell for more clarity on the course of monetary policy going forward after it struck a hawkish tone last week. Gold miners such as Silver Lake Resources, Newcrest Mining and De Grey Mining could open with a slight downtick. On Tuesday, the benchmark iron ore futures in China fell for a second consecutive session, trimming its gains in 2021 to 31% from more than a 50% gain at the peak. That's as China's plans to investigate into commodity prices dented sentiments. The iron ore futures contract for the September month delivery on the Dalian Commodity Exchange fell 5.2% to 1,110 yuan per tonne, its lowest level in 2 weeks. The futures closed the session 2.7% down at 1,139 yuan a tonne. On Tuesday, copper prices ticked up from 10-week lows as investors waited to find out if the Federal Powell will give guidance on the pace of US monetary tightening in testimony to Congress. Local miners could be in focus for the day: the Rio Tinto, BHP Group and Fortescue Metals. Okay, that's all from me for now. Stay tuned with Kalkine TV for more live market updates. We'll be back with more news on the markets, economy and diverse themes and sectors. I'm Rachel, signing off for now.